Good afternoon and welcome, everybody. It's Thursday. It's 1 p.m. Eastern, which means it's ship show time. Thank you so much for joining us again. I'm your host, Jason Brand. I'm the Director of Outreach and Partner Development here at Supply Chain Solutions. And today we are talking about tariffs. What's going on? What's happening next? Some of the current responses we're seeing. This is obviously a huge subject, and we're really on the first couple pages of it. So we're going to use this episode as more of a kind of catch you up to what's currently happening at the moment. But more on that in a second. First, before we dive into the show, I've been mentioning this at the beginning of each episode so far this year. We're going through some behind the scenes changes right now. And as a result, some of these shows, they're going to be a little bit shorter. We're doing that for less post-production work. And, occasionally a mistake here and there. So apologies, but as we go week over week, we're getting better. We do have some really fantastic updates to the show coming over the next couple weeks, next couple months, and some great guests we've got coming as well. So get excited for all of that. Bear with us for the time being, but we're going to make these quick. So stay tuned and, well, buckle up. And let's get this show on the road. So I think the first thing we've got to say, and really I kind of covered this lightly, is there is a lot going on right now. So what I want to focus on today are the 3 executive orders that were signed in on February 1st or issued on February 1st. And those have to do with placing tariffs on China, on Canada, and on Mexico. So stepping back to last Saturday, President Donald Trump signed 3 executive orders issuing tariffs on the U.S.'s top 3 trading partners. One of those executive orders placed a 25% tariff on goods from Mexico, another a 25% tariff on goods from Canada, and on top of that, another 10% tariff on Canadian energy sources. And the third and final order was an additional 10% tariff on imports from China. Now, the Trump administration it said they were imposing these tariffs to stop the flow of fentanyl across U.S. borders. And, after kind of checking out all 3 of the executive orders, really the titles of them and the beef, at least of the beginning of them, all kind of line up with that, with the exception of Mexico. But that's really here nor there. Mexico's the executive order title was specifically imposing duties to address the situation at our southern border. I think that was more or less meant as a catch-all statement because obviously there's more than fentanyl that's the issue. Now, most of us in the logistics industry really found ourselves in a pretty tough position. We had our clients coming to us looking for advice on how to deal with these potential tariffs. This has been obviously happening since Q3 of last year when we started to hear rumblings about them. And, they're really asking, should we front load our inventory? What's the likeliness of these tariffs actually happening? And, initially the expectation from our teams was plan on those tariffs happening the first day Trump is in office. And, that was really in line with what he was saying on the campaign trail. It's what we had to go off of. Obviously, we know tariffs had been levied before, and very, very obviously large tariffs that are still in effect. But so what actually happened, though, is on the first day in office, he issued a memorandum, and that directed federal agencies to conduct a trade policy review that needed to be completed no later than April 1st. And the outcome, really the goal of that memorandum, was for recommendations primarily on the tariffs, but also on a couple other trade-related matters. Now, us in the industry kind of viewed this as we kind of celebrated it. We're like, okay, great. This could be a potential pause in the tariffs. This could give us a little bit more time. It is a conventionally slow season of the year. Obviously, you've got your little bit of a rush that happens before Chinese New Year, but in general, it's a slower season of the year. So in order to kind of get through contract season and things like that, that was beneficial. But that momentary kind of like, okay, cool, we could push this off for a second, it was shut down pretty fast because just a couple days in, Trump did confirm it was his intent that he was still going to go forward with those tariffs on all 3, China, Canada, and Mexico. And he also mentioned that February 1st was the likely start date for that. So, since these tariffs have been announced, you can imagine there has been a flurry of activity. And before we dive into the details, I think it's important just to have this in bold that the Canadian and Mexican tariff start dates are pushed back. They're pushed back by at least 30 days. The expectation is more than that, but 30 days is really the starting point. Actually, quite specifically, Canada talked about it likely being more than that. Mexico very much focused on a timeline of a month right now. So I think there's a few things that have to kind of fall into place in order for those tariffs to get pushed back further than a month. Now, first up, Canada. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on Saturday evening in retaliation to the announced tariffs, said that Canada would issue their own tariffs. They didn't issue a 25% tax on $155 billion worth of US imports. Now, what he also mentioned was that those tariffs would come in two different, I'm going to call them sections. It's been referred to as phases, but really, I think the best way of putting it is sections. So the first section of items going under tariff would start on the 4th, or would have started on the 4th. And that includes $30 billion worth of imports. It includes things like oranges, paper towel, motorcycles, actually some odds and ends items across the board. But then the second section wouldn't come into effect until after a 21-day comment period. And that second section would include the remaining $125 billion worth of goods. But obviously, for the time being, the Canadian potential of a Canadian trade war is on hold. So both Justin Trudeau and Donald Trump, they went on different social media platforms and they posted about how they've been in communication and, things are at least delayed for 30 days, if not more. As a result of this communication, Canada is deploying nearly 10,000 frontline personnel as part of what is going to be a $1.3 billion security plan. Additionally, Justin Trudeau announced he would sign a $200 million intelligence directive related to combating organized crime and fentanyl distribution. There's also talk of a fentanyl czar, and I'm really kind of trying to put that into the equation still. We're going to have to wait and see on that as these talks kind of continue. Now, the situation in Mexico, like I kind of alluded to, it's resolving itself more swiftly, but it definitely seems to be a more tense situation. So the U.S. tariffs on Mexico, obviously, they're also pushed back for a month. Mexico's also sending 10,000 troops to the U.S.-Mexico border for the purpose of the prevention of drug trafficking between the two countries. Now, meanwhile, Trump did agree that the U.S. would work on our side of the border to prevent high-powered weapons getting into Mexico from the U.S. Now, as you kind of read their communication between the Mexican president and between the U.S. president, you kind of see there is a little bit more tension here and a little bit more on the line. And quite frankly, it was announced, I think a good part of this, there's already been announced a plan for what's going to be happening over the next month. So just Monday, it was said that U.S. officials, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick, are going to be conducting negotiations with representatives from the Mexican government over the next month to really fine-tune a deal between the two countries that is sustainable. And, after the tariff delay was announced, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum took to social media and kind of aired some grievances. So I'm just going to straight quote this. So if the United States wants to combat organized crime that traffics drugs and generates violence, we must work together in an integrated way. She switched to Spanish and she went on to say, but always with respect for shared responsibility, mutual trust, collaboration, and above all, respect for sovereignty, which is not negotiable. Coordination, yes. Subordination, no. So you can see the tension there and the pushback is, it's definitely a little stronger than we were getting from Justin Trudeau in general. And obviously, we're only within 1 week out of these tariffs being implemented. So it's going to be a little bit of time before we can see what situation is sustainable, what situation is not sustainable, and what the fallout is going to be. It's also important to note that those Canadian tariffs are still on the table. With respect to Mexico, they have been discussing for months the potential of these tariffs. And there's actually a series of different plans they had, some involving tariffs, some not involving tariffs. What was seen is Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum did publicly tweet to her finance director that they were going to be taking Plan B into effect. Still, we need to learn a little bit more what that means, but we're probably going to see the Mexico-U.S. situation heat up a lot hotter and a lot faster than we are going to see with the U.S.-Canada situation. Now, as you can imagine, finally, with the Chinese tariffs, not only are they sticking, but things are already heating up. And this is actually where we want to integrate some of our new technology that we're going to be using with this show. So we're going to be adding a blog. It's going to be an after the show blog, and we're going to run through all of the tariffs on that blog and everything that's kind of changing between US and China, because China is hitting back with tariffs as well. Obviously, some of these prices are getting pretty lofty, and we'd like to kind of itemize that out. Also, the benefit of a blog is sometimes some of the data looks a lot more, it looks better visually and a little bit easier to remember, if not more impactful. So Anyways, that's our quick update on what's going on in the tariff situation. There is a lot more coming. There's going to be more posts we're going to be pushing out. But thank you so much for joining us this week. We'll catch you again next week.